Welcome to Actualize, a podcast focused on the intersection of performance, ambition, and mental health. I'm your host, Rob Pintwala. My goal for the show is to not only celebrate success, but also shed light on the challenges and sacrifices that come with ambition. Actualize is brought to you by First Session. Launched in 2019, I started First Session to help you find the right therapist. First Session is purposely designed more like a dating website than a clinical website, as we're completely focused on helping you find the right fit the first time. My team and I interview and vet our partner therapists, so you can simply browse videos, see who you vibe with, and instantly book a session. Check us out at firstsession.com and see why more than 7,000 Canadians have chosen First Session to find a therapist. This episode is with Margaret Coons, founder and CEO of Nuts for Cheese. Margaret went from working part-time at a vegan restaurant while in university, making plant-based cheeses in the kitchen, to operating a multinational plant-based CPG company with products found in thousands of locations across North America. In this episode, we discuss Margaret's founding story, what compelled her to build a business, her focus on sustainability and inclusivity, and how she maintains her own wellness. We discuss the importance of community and mentors, and we also talk about therapy and coaching and how Margaret utilizes both for her mental health and personal development. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Margaret Coons. Hey, Margaret, thank you so much for joining me today on Actualize.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so fun to be here.
Yeah, we were just catching up very briefly before starting this, and I was telling you I was trying to get caught up on your life between now and grade 12, which is probably when we last hung out at high school together. So yeah, I'm very excited and I've been watching you from afar and your business, and I've tried the product, but very excited to get caught up here.
Yeah, well, likewise. I've been really enjoying following your journey as well. So this is so fun, like a throwback and a catch up at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we could just get started for folks who don't aren't familiar with Nuts for Cheese or you or both. Maybe we can just fill everyone in on what your company does, the product, and like maybe a little condensed version of the journey. I'm sure like where people can find it. Might as well throw that in right at the front.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I founded the company called Nuts for Cheese in 2015. Started at a farmer's market in London, Ontario, where we're based. But essentially, we're a manufacturer of dairy-free and organic cashew-based products. So our flagship line of products is cashew-based cheese wedge. And we have 7 different varieties of that are sold in Canada and the US. And then we also have cream cheese spreads that just launched and a product called Nuts for Butter, which is our cashew-based butter line. But all of our products are fermented, they're organic, they're dairy-free, of course. And then we're sold, all across Canada and pretty much every major retailer, and then in the US, in about 2,000 stores in the natural channel.
It's incredible. I love that. Maybe, yeah, to jump into next, I heard you talking about on a different podcast that you have been vegetarian from fairly young, I think, or you said around 12 maybe, and then more so vegan around, I don't know, 19 or
19.
20 or something like that. Tell me a little bit more about like at 12, what did you became a vegetarian? Like what influenced that?
So I'd never really been a huge meat eater as a child. It never was, one of my favorite food groups. It was always kind of the last thing I left on my plate. I actually was at summer camp and I had noticed that there was like a vegetarian salad bar option. And, being around 12, I was like, oh, I'm going to try this. And came home for the summer from summer camp. And I told my family, oh, I'm a vegetarian now. And they're like, no, you're not. we're not. We're not cooking 2 dinners. We don't know how to make all this vegetarian food. And I kind of faltered a little bit back and forth around that time. And then I happened upon a PETA video called Meet Your Meat. So you can imagine it was
Hmm.
kind of rough slaughterhouse footage that was not super great to watch as a 12-year-old. And that was kind of what did it for me. So I had a pretty young kind of animal rights standpoint in terms of the way I was eating. And then over time, it really evolved. I went to boarding school with you in St. Catharines, and I was able to really kind of choose what I ate all through high school. And then going to university, I got really into cooking and ended up becoming vegan around the age of 19. But a lot of it was through, a lot of culinary exploration and like learning to love to cook.
Yeah, yeah, and I know the product is not just for vegans or vegetarians. And I know that there's this huge, movement, which I think is fantastic, for eating less meat and less animal products, even if you're not fully, 0% animal products. And I also wanted to talk about, in university. So I understand you worked at a restaurant, and that's sort of how this all came about. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started working at a vegan restaurant during my undergrad. So I went to Western and was again really into cooking. I was a huge foodie and really exploring lots of different recipes and making up new recipes. And my dream was to work at the local vegan restaurant. It was like the only restaurant in town I ever wanted to go to. And I started working there on the weekends just as like a prep cook, helping out in the kitchen. And was so thrilled to get that job. Honestly, would have volunteered there if they hadn't hired me. And it was, so fun from a young age to, get to be around like-minded people and really kind of continue to hone my skills and my love for cooking. And following my undergrad, I actually took a culinary program as well. And that really kind of dovetailed nicely with my work at the restaurant, and had kind of worked my way up through the restaurant there and had a lot of opportunities to, create menu items and do cooking demos and do a lot of community outreach on behalf of the restaurant. And so when I was kind of ending my time there, my original plan was, I want to start my own vegan restaurant, or I want to take this restaurant over and I want to really continue in this industry. But I thought at 24 I might start like with the farmers market for the summer, because I'd been making these vegan cheeses for the restaurant menu and doing different flavors every week and starting to ferment some other products and doing a lot of experimentation and getting really great feedback on the products. And you're right, they're totally not just for people that are, vegan or vegetarian. But at the time in 2015, there was so much less availability of products like this and so much less familiarity with the category as well. Like now everyone drinks almond milk, but in 2015, not everyone drank almond milk, or like had someone in their family who was avoiding dairy for whatever reason. And so it really kind of started with, I'll try a farmer's market for the summer, take these cheeses there. I was renting the restaurant kitchen in the middle of the night to make the products. And then it just started to just snowball a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's such a it just seems like such an authentic story. I mean, been thinking, like, we've talked to founders here in the, on the podcast, and I love talking to founders, but I think, I was speaking with someone recently just about, almost like entrepreneurship as an art form, or like, creation through business, even if it's not, a big business, right? It could be, you don't even need to sell anything, just being creative. Whereas, like, I think a lot of people get caught up in just the numbers, or they watch, the news, or, the stock market or something like that. And there's a lot of people in the world that treat businesses for numbers first, right? But it strikes me that that's not your, that wasn't your approach. And I just think that's amazing. I wanted to know a little bit about, like, what do you remember, like, what propelled you to, start outside of that restaurant, and going to those farmers markets? Like you probably could have got like a job that maybe had more guaranteed like income, rather than just risking that. What, like, was it more of a creativity thing, or what was it?
I think it was a creativity thing. And it's funny, I was talking to someone the other day about this, about just how when people start businesses, I think if they, especially in CPG or manufacturing, if they really knew what they were getting into, like would they have made that same decision years later looking back? I'm so grateful for the journey that I've had, but it's definitely been hard, right? And there's been so many challenges, so many things that I would have never anticipated, so many things I didn't know. And it's like kind of like, thank God you didn't know. Because that would deter people from actually kind of taking the leap. But it was definitely a creative outlet for me. And then I think it just really fed into the fact that like whatever I'm doing, just as a personality trait, like I'm doing it 150%. So I never really like thought about, am I going to be doing this in 8 years, or am I going to be selling products all across North America? It was just kind of like one day after the other. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And it was super fun to, start to build something out of nothing. And it still is, because there's so much, opportunity, and you can take things in whatever direction you want, within reason. And I think it's, when you're building something, you get to really do something new. Whether it's a product that's existed before or not, you can kind of make it your own.
Yeah, about the hard parts that were naive to. And I think, I am and was naive to some of the hard parts about growing a business as well. But I think, do you remember any, like, first, really hard experiences that you questioned continuing? Like, do you remember what those were? And do you remember why you didn't stop?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has been, and I've done a lot of like reflecting on this because there's like no shortage of challenges when you're scaling any type of business. But I think in manufacturing and production, like it's a physical and laborious thing to scale when you're a bootstrap company, especially. And I bootstrapped for the first 7 years of the business and hired people and, somehow purchased equipment by funneling every, dollar of profit back into the company and taking advantage of grants and things like that. But a lot of it was really, me being the person who was right in the thick of all of the production for quite some time. And, I've always been the person that, whatever needs to get done, I'll be the person to jump in and do it. And where we're at today is very different than where we were at 5 years ago or 6 years ago, where we've got, an incredible team and a lot of support on the manufacturing side. But, a lot of it was, oh my God, we've gotten a massive order in and we don't have enough people to fulfill it. And so, I'm at the facility at midnight with my family, packing an order, whatever friends could, come in to help and support. And I think there's a lot of things around like equipment malfunctions or challenges with people over the years that I think you don't really anticipate. And especially when you're growing a business, it's just trying to figure out how to do something bigger, faster, more limited resources. It's always interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that you remain bootstrapped or like self-funded for that long is incredible, especially with that type of business. Like that is incredible. On that note, like what was kind of driving you for the growth, Like where did this hunger for growth come from, in your personality? Do you know? Have you reflected on that?
Yeah, I think I'm like a competitive person, but I'm really competitive with myself. And so I'm always trying to push myself to, do better, do more kind of every day and do things in a, more efficient or unique way. And I feel like my timing has been really great throughout the whole kind of journey of the business. When I first started out, we were one of the only companies making a product like this, and there was a lot of need for it in the market. And so the opportunity was there. And, I think when you have that kind of feeling of momentum and, you're filling a need for people and providing something that people really, really want and don't have access to, it's so exciting. And it gets kind of addictive, right? And then you start to have this team that you're building and you want to, continue to grow with them and have the journey continue. And so I think that that's probably a lot of the motivation is the consumers that love the product and then the team that's grown with me.
Yeah. Yeah. When people look from the outside, and they see and they hear that you're in, yeah, thousands of locations and you have this big facility and, I think perhaps people, especially maybe even before you fundraise, but people, probably think that you have made it or are really successful. This is a guess, but I'm guessing that you haven't taken that much time to like reap the rewards or relax or, buy something really nice or something like that, Like, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how do you still feel like you're in the thick of it? Or have you been able to step back and kind of, you know, relax a little bit? Or is that
Oh,
even what you want to do?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something I think about a lot because I'm absolutely in the thick of it. But a lot of that is by just like the kind of passion for the project and the company, and I like to be in the middle of everything. But I do think that one opportunity for growth is to be able to celebrate the wins a little bit more because I think when you're so close to everything, it's so easy to not see how like magical and exciting stuff is. It's so easy to only see the problems and you can have a major win and then immediately you're thinking about like a shipment that didn't get out on time or something that was supposed to be delivered that wasn't or whatever the problem might be. And I think that that's like a huge growth practice for any founder to really acknowledge the moments as they're happening, because otherwise the journey just goes so fast.
Is that something that you're actively working on? And when did you
Yeah.
start to work on that? Yeah.
Well, I think I've been working on it for years and, some days are easier than others. And, I think it's interesting. We were talking to a person who's been helping us with some of our content creation strategy recently and just talking through some of the stories of the brand and the company. And, from an outsider perspective, someone can be like, oh my God, slow down, stop. That's such an interesting thing. I want to pull this out. I want to tease this out here. And when you're so close to it, you're just like, oh, I didn't, you don't even think about these things. You're just kind of running and trying to keep everything together. It's like that, building the plane as it's taking off kind of feeling almost all the time. And I think that is like part of the excitement and the adrenaline that kind of keeps founders hooked on growing something. And I think the scary part is like how I feel is sometimes like if I am not like that, is are things going to start to fall? So if you're not running and keeping everything and always worried and always, making sure that everything's okay and everyone's okay, like will I kind of drop the ball on something? Which I think I kind of accredit to, how I've gotten this far in life, but I do think there's probably opportunities to let go and relax and enjoy the little moments a bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine you've had to with, hiring a team and, not being solely responsible for every single thing, even though I'm sure it all rolls up to you still. Yeah, tell me a little bit about like hiring and relinquishing responsibility or, delegating any particular like learnings or challenges that you've had with people. Like, did you hire friends by, like just because of, you knew them? Like, what have you learned about like, yeah, putting the right people on the bus, as some folks say in the business world?
Yeah, I think it's an evolving journey. In the early days for sure it was, friends and family who could, help me for a couple hours a week, just putting cheese in boxes and getting it out the door. And, I think our strategy around team building and culture has changed a lot over the years. I've always found that my role personally has like encapsulated everything, but it's also changed every 6 months pretty much since I started the business, where there's always been something that I've had to let go of in order to do something else or do something differently. And I think, in terms of change management for myself, I'm okay with that. I think that that's where sometimes when you're building a team and you can run that fast and you can adjust your kind of schedule that fast, so you can expect that other people are going to be up for that as well. And that's really like such a startup life mentality. And I think as you're building the team, you do need to kind of find people that have a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit so that they can really kind of embrace the speed of a startup that's growing quickly. But our team's really evolved and changed a lot, particularly in the last couple of years. And, I mentioned we were bootstrapped for the first 7 years. We raised our first round of funding in June of 2020. And that's, allowed me to add some really key hires to the team that have definitely taken a lot of my plate and changed my role pretty significantly. And I still work very closely with, every single one of them and dabble in every department, probably more than I should. But I got definitely like some amazing experts who, have far more experience and know a lot more about what they're doing than I might in a specific arena, and feel very
Yeah.
fortunate for that.
Yeah. That's amazing. I have 5 questions to ask you right now, but before I get too far ahead of myself, I wanted to make sure we don't skip past the like self-competitiveness part that you mentioned and like how how do you be competitive with yourself but also not like beat yourself up on the regular?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think that that's something that again has been like attributed to how I've gotten to where I am today, but it's something that I could definitely soften a bit because I'm for sure the hardest on myself and definitely have perfectionist tendencies and, always want to make sure that everyone else is good kind of ahead of anything else. And I think that, drive for wanting things to be good and to be right is really helpful. But I also think that it can kind of get in the way sometimes. And we've been talking about it as like a senior leadership team recently. Like, a lot of us have this kind of perfectionist streak to us or like a aspect of our personalities. And where can we find ways that, we can be good and run fast rather than be perfect and, take longer than we need to get something done. And that's definitely advice I've received from, mentors over the years. And it is how I operate for the most part. Like if you've got something, 60% baked, do you feel confident enough to kind of run with it? Or do you need to wait until it's 90? And it's something I see with younger founders too. I do, quite a bit of mentorship with early stage founders that are starting food businesses. And a lot of people really wanna, like, have the business plan buttoned up. They wanna have some financial projections, like, maybe they've gone to business school. Like, I did not go to business school. I was an English major. I didn't have kind of that traditional learning around how to structure a business. I didn't know how to read a financial statement when I first started and all these various things, and I think you can
Yeah.
kinda detail yourself to death, and it's important to find that right balance, and I think it's good to be hard on yourself, but, with a level of compassion for everything that you're handling and how far you've come as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, as you mentioned before, maybe if you did go to business school, you could quite possibly not have founded this business. Yeah, it might not have worked out. Maybe you would have been on Bay Street or Wall Street. You mentioned mentors, and that you are sort of a mentor now. Even before you took on funding, did you have people that you could call on, whether they're like in the business, field of CPG or just family, or like
Yeah,
who did you rely on?
I've had a few really great mentors over the years, and one in particular who actually is, become a partner in the business and sits on our board of directors now. His name's Mike Jane, and he was a former CFO of Pepsi Canada. And I met him years ago through my mom, actually. My mom had moved into a new neighborhood and had invited all of her new neighbors over for a cocktail party. And I think I was doing a demo sampling our products. It was early years. I was, standing in a grocery store with a table, and it was downtown Toronto. I was like hauling all this stuff back to my car. It was like such a, long day, big drive, like big effort kind of day. My mom called me and said, "There's this really interesting guy at my house. You should stop by on your way back to London." And she lived in Ancaster. And so I ended up popping into her house, and this guy, Mike, really was asking me a lot of questions. I was still working part-time at the restaurant at the time. It was kind of that first year. He's like, "What are you doing? You got to quit your job. You got to do this. Like, think about this." And just gave me like all of this really like kind of big topics to think about. And that night I left and I was like, "Who was that?" And he, called me a week later and said, "I think you need a mentor and I can help you." And he's been like my partner in crime ever since. He's been like totally the, person I lean on when I need advice. And I'm so happy that he sits on our board now as well. He's a good friend and a great advisor.
I find that fascinating. So it sounds like your mom pretty much sold you on to this guy that she just met at her neighborhood party. And then he like somehow like sees something in you that early, gives you all this speed guidance, and then calls you a week later. Like, that's so rare.
I feel so lucky about that experience because, yeah, it's truly changed the trajectory of the business. And just having such classical product experience, having come from, a company like Pepsi, and also just having really great sense of people. I've had, really great guidance and team structure and, org chart and finance literacy over the years from
Wow.
working with him.
Sounds like that's the MBA that you didn't get.
Yes.
Yeah,
Had
that's
10,000
incredible.
hours of entrepreneurship, similar to
Wow.
MBA, I think.
Wow, that sounds incredible.
Just a quick introduction to chat about my company, First Session. Have you had a less than ideal experience looking for a therapist? There are lots of options out there, but it's hard to know where to get started and who to trust. My company, First Session, focuses entirely on creating the best experience finding a therapist. We vet and verify each therapist we work with, interview them on camera, and allow you to browse on your own time to see who you vibe with. You can see updated availability and book directly with them. No phone calls, no email back and forths. Run through videos and find the right therapist for you the first time at firstsession.com.
Let's talk a little bit about your 3 commitments to Nuts for Cheese as listed on your website. Yeah, maybe you can explain what those are. And have they always been that way? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we've got a lot of different kind of company commitments that are, significant to us. And I think, some big ones are around sustainability and culture and inclusivity. And I think they all kind of form this holistic approach to how we think about things. We're an organic, high quality, premium product. We're plant-based. We're, focused on the environmental sustainability aspect of the product, but also, the sustainability of the team and the company, and making sure that we've got great sustainable relationships with all of our external partners. And I think that really ties into our inclusivity piece as well, because we're, a LGBT founded organization. We're a women founded and led organization, have a lot of diversity within our team. And I think all of those, commitments really kind of tie together from the product to the people to the customers to create a little bit of a Nuts for Cheese worldview.
Yeah, I resonate with those values. I wanted to maybe talk about 2 of them more. First, maybe the sustainability piece. Like, we live in this kind of world now where if you're lucky to have the education or, you're savvy on the internet and can kind of figure out like what's healthy to consume and what's not, a lot of the info points towards like non-processed foods, plant-based foods. or maybe I'm getting my information from the wrong place, but that's at least what I
Depends what side of
see
TikTok
and
you're on.
consume. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But I see all these, like, firstly, I have some friends in the CPG world, and as you know, sort of a family history being in that world as well. And I just see it like so, firstly, competitive,
Yeah.
but two, it often from an outsider's perspective, because I'm not in it personally, it kind of looks like just a giant marketing war. And it's like, well, these are all just packaged foods. Many of them these days are labeled as healthy or sustainable or both. But they really might not be, because they're packaged foods and processed. Like, how do you think about that sustainability from that perspective? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's an interesting time. And I mean, you don't have to go to too many trade shows to see, like, you can be at a natural foods trade show, and the amount of plastic wrap and shipping and flights and everything that it took everyone to get there is not a sustainable experience necessarily. But I do think it's really interesting to see how the space has developed in terms of natural foods or plant-based foods, because there are a lot of products that aren't necessarily great for you, or they're not great tasting, or they're not particularly sustainable. It's, different products that are kind of flown in from different places in the world where they're processed to be secondarily processed and manufactured. And so for us, it really does feel like a true core pillar, because we do manufacture all of our products using real whole food ingredients, and really try our best on the packaging side to be compostable or recyclable at the very least, and all of those things. But I think from a plant-based standpoint in general, it's not any surprise to anyone that, animal agriculture is a contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And so for me, from a young age, it was that animal rights piece, but then it was also environmental sustainability and then health. And those are kind of the three pillars of why most people choose to, adopt even like a partly plant-based diet or a reducitarian kind of approach, is those three things. So, we're trying as an organization to be better all the time. And of course we have to do things like ship product all over the place too. But I think the closer you can kind of get to, a clean label product with real foods in it that has a functional benefit for the consumer, the better.
Yeah. Just out of my own curiosity, do you see the public being a little bit more savvy and educated towards, like, reading past some of the, like, this is healthy or like this is less bad? Like, have you seen that? I know it's amazing that you've kind of approached this from such a, like, authentic way
Well,
from the
yeah,
beginning.
I do think so. I think people, and, like, it kind of comes and goes in waves. I think a lot of people are a lot more conscious about the ingredients in their foods. And, some of it I think can be some, propaganda from whatever, marketing angle the big money in the industry has. And you kind of have to read things with a grain of salt. But I definitely have seen consumers become a lot more aware around how the food, particularly that they're eating, makes them feel. And that's, I
Mm.
think, the biggest shift that I've noticed is that, a lot of people might adopt a plant-based diet because they think it's going to make them feel better. But if they're eating only highly processed foods or that are high in sodium or, various seed oils and things like that, it's not going to necessarily make you feel great. And so I think people are really becoming more in tune with how foods make them feel. And that's exciting for me, because we're not a product just for plant-based people. It's, a product for people that don't consume dairy for any variety of reasons or want to reduce their intake. So yeah, I think so.
Yeah. No, that's great. And so for the inclusivity, you mentioned a little bit about why that's important to you. Curious if you've kind of either witnessed or personally felt, some, prejudice or, mistreatment, either in former jobs, schools, workplaces. Like, did any, is there any particular, like, scenarios, circumstances that have motivated you to be more of, like, clear about your value of inclusivity?
I mean, I think so. And I think I've witnessed it in terms of, how people in my life have been treated over the years as well. And I think really the more folks can lead by example and, be brave and put themselves out there, the better. I think more than anything, I've, found myself in an industry that is, very like male dominated. And I've had lots of experiences where, like, I was really young when I started. I was, young and female. And, I had a lot of instances where people would never assume that this was my company, or, asked to speak to the boss or whatever it is. And like none of that, like that kind of rolls off my back. It's fine. But it's, I think, more about how do we set up inclusive structures and really take up space and set good examples for people that like may or may not feel comfortable being themselves. And I think that as a, a female founder, as an LGBT identifying person, that's something that when you're growing up, you may not necessarily know how to take up space or how to be represented if you don't have great examples. And so I like to try to be the best example that I can for other people that may be feeling a little bit, unsure about themselves or how they can present in the world.
No, that's lovely. Like, it's incredible. I'm curious around if you've had any challenges sort of balancing, so if let's say you're attracting a lot of folks who, traditionally might not feel welcome in other workplaces. And, when they're seeing other injustices happening in the world, whether that's locally or on a global scale or whatever, on TikTok, right? And so much of that, I know that for these folks, it can be like quite triggering for them and unsettling. And of course, like understandably so. Do you have any, like, has there been any sort of challenges like, keeping like the business, objectives in check and kind of everyone focused on, the task at hand and doing their jobs versus any sort of like, more like activism tendencies or anything like that? I might be like fully
Yeah.
like out of,
No, it's a good
asking a
it's a
terrible
good
question here, but
No, it's a good question.
yeah.
It's funny. I was thinking about, well, I mean, not specifically this, but I think, when I first started the company, I was definitely like fresh out of university, I was like, had, a lot more political lens really front of mind in terms of how I approached every single thing that we did. And I think the most important thing as a leader is to try to have like opportunities and channels for clear communication. And I think give people a lot of grace. I think we've been super fortunate to have, people that are super professional in the workplace and can generally kind of, come in and stay focused on what they're trying to do. But of course, like life happens, and whether it's a politically motivated challenge or something personal in their lives, there's always going to be stuff that comes up as just part of working with humans. And so I think we have some, some good systems in place for making sure that people have the support that they need, and try to improve on that every day. But I mean, you're a little bit of an expert in the area, so I totally defer to your experience on how to
Oh,
best support people in that way.
I don't know about being an expert, but I know there's a lot of challenges in the world, and
Yes.
it's up front and center in everyone's phones whenever they want to look at it or perhaps don't want to look at it. And I know just even my partner working at a very, I don't know, like a woman-owned business that's has a lot of social justice kind of values. Like it can be a challenge to kind of like do all the business things, but also be
Yeah. Well, it's
empathetic.
hard, right? Because there is so many big, scary things happening in the world, and every once in a while, you are just like, "Wow!" It does make you feel existential to see all the pain and suffering that's happening everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about motivation, and we touched a little bit about like when you started and just kind of like was this sound like a creative outlet that just kind of one foot after another rolled into this. Have you ever had like trouble with motivation, or have you had to like refine where you get your motivation from, or has it been pretty like linear as far as you still want to keep getting this product out into the world and that sort of thing?
I think I've always had the motivation for getting the product out into the world for sure, but I think the kind of sources of motivation have shifted and changed over time. And, I think it's still really very much getting, great product into people's hands and, creating a better food system and giving people products that make them feel good and are full of good, healthy ingredients. But I think also I have such a strong motivation now to, really support the growing team and to continue to give people opportunities to grow in the company that I built. And we have such good partners that we work with now too, externally to the business. And so I think it's really become this kind of nice symbiotic relationship where I've got all these people that I feel very fortunate to grow with, and I want to keep doing that. And then I think another thing is like I still do all of our product development. And so I love creating new products and formulating new recipes and things like that. And so that's really fun for me and motivating to think about, 2 years from now, could we launch this type of product, or where does this fit in the marketplace? And I'm going to try a new recipe on this, and I'm going to try to improve this product that we already have. And that's really fun and motivating for me as well.
That's amazing. How has it been having to like learn, in terms of just like I've heard other, founders of fast growing businesses say that, they have to learn as fast or like faster or grow faster than the business is growing. Does it feel like a lot sometimes, like especially as you've hired these other external professionals to come in now with your team? Like, do you feel any sort of like imposter syndrome ever, or how do you
Oh, yeah.
maintain yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think even before that, imposter syndrome is a big part of it. But I do think like that is one place where I feel like when I'm feeling the most crunched and overwhelmed and like I'm up to my ears in a million different things, it's typically because I haven't had time to like do my meditation, to get some exercise, to get any downtime to let my thoughts process or let things percolate. That's when I'm like, okay, if I'm not doing my own personal development work, then it's 10 times harder to keep up with everything that's happening in the business. And then I think for sure, in the last year and a half, we've become a, institutionally backed company. We've got governance structure and a board now. I'm doing this role of CEO much differently than I was before, where, I have a board to report to and senior leadership team to continue to grow with every day. And I think that that's really caused me to, try to level up quickly in a short period of time.
yeah, that's incredible adaptation. Let's talk a little bit more about your you said, I think, personal development, like your sort of wellness routine. How long have you had this or like, tell me a little bit more about that. Has it remained consistent? Have you added things, dropped things in order to keep you, fresh and not burnt out?
Yeah, I feel like I'm adding new things all the time. I've got all kinds of like funny things around the house that I do for a couple of weeks and then forget that I have. But no, I think my kind of mindfulness journey started pretty young. I started practicing yoga when I was in high school, and I took my yoga teacher training while I was doing my undergrad at Western as well. So I actually taught yoga for about 7 years in my early 20s until about a year and a half after I started the business. I kind of had to step away from the yoga teaching and just really found that when I was teaching a class, I was like, I need this so much more than I need to be teaching it. So it was
Yeah.
a kind of clear sign that I needed to find some wellness practice for myself. But
Switch back to being a student.
exactly, yeah. But no, I try to prioritize some movement, some breath work, some meditation or mindfulness, and healthy eating. Staying hydrated, taking my supplements, and I'm up in the wellness industry too, so I'm always interested in what different companies are putting out there in terms of adaptogenic remedies and things like that to help handle stress and help feel good really naturally. But got all kinds of fun things like a chi machine and a spiky mat, a sauna that I kind of rotate between things like that as well to amplify the good feelings.
Is that sauna something you bring with you when you move places?
Yeah, actually, I did. I had to break it apart into panels and move it here when I moved into the new house.
I love that. That's incredible. Where and the meditation piece, so did that evolve out of doing yoga when you were younger? And how have you been able to maintain that?
Yeah, I sometimes do guided meditations now. For the longest time, when I had a more quiet mind and things were less kind of hectic before starting a business, I was able to really just kind of sit down and close my eyes and kind of get into that state more quickly. I sometimes feel like that's accessible, and sometimes I like to listen to a guided meditation. And I've got kind of a handful of guides online that I'll go to, and sometimes I'll do some yoga with Adrienne type meditations if I'm feeling like something a little bit more fun. And I really like her guided classes as well, or dabbled in the Joe Dispenza universe as well for some more, serious kind of out of body meditation experiences. But I like to have those kinds of resources that you can lean on when you're not feeling like you've got the capacity to do it on your own.
And I'm curious, like, how would you describe your, it sounds like from a very young age you've been interested in just like wellness. Like, where did that come from? I know that's like it's weird to think about that that's kind of like still the minority of people. It's
Yeah.
maybe different now, but like when I guess when we were in like, high school and like I don't know, I wasn't that concerned about being well. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've always been kind of chasing the how can I feel more good kind of thing from a young age. And I don't think it was always like super spiritual or well focused on wellness. And, definitely like to, have a lot of fun when I was younger too. It was a lot less serious. But, I do think it's kind of that pursuit of like, how can I feel a little bit better every day? And I think when you're growing up and going through all kinds of different things, especially when you're a teenager. And, I had a bit of a more chaotic kind of childhood experience growing up and then being out of the home from a young age. Those kinds of things were good pillars for me when I was starting to be a little bit more independent as an adult. And I really found yoga, for example, was something that kept bringing me back to myself and helping me kind of ground when like there's various things going on, including like stresses of being in school and working and having roommates and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just, there's so many different ways that I've learned to like look after yourself. And it's amazing to hear, what works for you. And like some people might be like super into journaling or therapy or whatever, like whatever, if they can afford that, um, have a coach all the time or something like that. But some people just can kind of do it themselves through yoga or maybe at home even and that sort of thing, which is I
Yeah,
find
well, I mean,
incredible.
I do therapy and coaching too.
Okay.
Well, a
Cool.
little bit of everything, but yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel like coaching and therapy is getting more like I'm in the therapy world, of course, but I'm starting to see more founders, more executives, and just like highly respected people in the business world talk more about therapy and coaching. And I know there's still this like the stigma is changing, but I know it's still just like the primary reason for people starting therapy usually is because they're in pain or
Mm.
they're in quite a bit of pain, something that's unbearable. But I've personally had experiences where you can really just evolve therapy into just mostly focusing on wellness and getting better and improving. And of course, there's things that happen that you want to help with and resolve. But yeah, how does that change for you? And have you witnessed, or do you not even care what others are doing?
No, I love to see people talking about their experiences with therapy. I think it's so cool, and I think it's something that for sure, like I've gone to therapy for a long time and started, dabbling with going to therapy when I was a late teenager, and I've, been going to the same therapist now for God, I think like 7 years, and layered on the coaching recently, and it's totally changed my life. And I think in times when I've had the really hard things going on and, burnout and lots of stress and various other, personal things happening. It's been such a kind of port in the storm as something that's so helpful. And I think everyone has those things. And I think everyone talks about them with their friends. And so, instead of only dumping things on your friends, you can go get some professional support as well and then still have those same conversations, but from, a more supported and kind of emotionally responsible place where you're, you know, doing some of the emotional labor yourself and then getting the support where it's appropriate.
Yeah. How do you think about coaching? What motivated you to start coaching after years of being in therapy? And how do you like, how is the relationship with your coach different than the therapist? Or maybe a better question is like,
Yeah.
what's the subject matter difference between a coach and a therapist for you?
I think I found that I was starting to talk about work so much in therapy, but I was finding that it was helpful to have different kind of outlets to talk about, personal stuff that is obviously still related to work because work is such a huge part of my life. But to have something where I could really kind of focus on work and, leadership responsibilities and how to evolve myself as a leader and how to, grow myself professionally that, my therapist is amazing and has definitely spent a lot of time listening to me talk about work, but, isn't necessarily the area of expertise in terms of, thinking about raising money or leading a team or, business structures and things like that. And so I found that kind of distinction really helpful. And I haven't found that there's been much overlap. I kind of thought I would, that, I'd interviewed other coaches in the past and had a couple of free sessions. And I kind of found like, I'm already getting this, what I need here from therapy. I don't need this. And the coach I've been working with for about the last year and a half, I've found something different with. So you can call
Yeah.
it free.
And how, and this is kind of a selfish question of this whole topic because I'm fascinated on it as well and kind of in the market. But I think others would be interested. Like, how did you choose this coach? Is it someone that had industry expertise? Is it someone that, and how does that coach differ? Is it more like now that you have a formal board and raise money that you can't necessarily, do you feel like you needed a formal coach instead of just your former advisors or like kind of angel investors that maybe you couldn't open up to them as much?
I mean, I feel like I'm very fortunate with the board and the investors that I have, and that we have like really, great kind of working relationship as well, where I do feel like I can go to them, different challenges or ask for advice or ask them to hop in a call with me on something or, do a strategy session together. So I don't think it's really that necessarily that I don't feel like I can go to them with the same things. It's just more, how do I best optimize the time that I have with the board and spend that time in a really focused way, and then, work with a coach kind of separately and other kind of more like personal business development type stuff, I guess, that does show up for sure in the board meetings as well. But in terms of how I found her, it was a recommendation from another female founder who actually lives in Victoria, who I love very much, and from DB's Organics. And so my friend Dion had recommended this coach to me, who's been awesome, and she does coach a number of other women founders, both in Canada and the US.
Incredible. I know we're coming up on time here, but what are you looking forward to in the next year? What's keeping you excited at work?
Oh, so many things. I think that innovation piece that we were talking about, I've got some kind of secret projects up my sleeve of a couple things I'm working on. But we just launched a new product line, our cream cheeses, earlier this year, and so they're just starting to really hit more distribution in Canada. We're launching them in the US right now as well. So that's a lot of fun, and got a ton of travel coming up in the next year as well. And a lot of it's trade shows, which, can be tiring, but it's also, I just find it so exciting to travel to different places and then go see our product on shelf in a store wherever I am, and get to keep meeting people and getting the word out about the product. And so I think those are some of the things for sure.
Amazing. And so what are some places in Canada? What are some of the top places in Canada that people can find Nuts for Cheese? Just as this is more of a Canadian focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in Canada, our top customers would be, Sobeys, Metro, Loblaws, Longo's, Whole Foods. At West we're in Save On Foods, Nestor's, Bilo. We're lots of great accounts kind of right across the country. Choices would be out near you as well. But we have a store locator on our website that has a whole list. You can just put in your postal code and it'll show you the closest store to you. But shouldn't be one too far. We're in about 2,000 natural food stores in Canada and major retailers.
That's incredible. And it's nutsforcheese.com.
Nutsforcheese.com and Nuts for Cheese on Instagram and LinkedIn and everything as well.
Awesome. We'll link all that out here in the show notes as well. But yeah, Margaret, I could talk to you for another hour easily, but I know you're busy and you got lots of stuff to do. So we'll call it there. But thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Actualize podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode, as well as all other episodes, at firstsession.com/podcast. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.